when you think of the Cincinnati Bengals and this matchup, what's the first thing that comes to mind that might be that gives you optimism that the 49ers will be able to take care of business?
Well, at first I was nervous because Trey Hendrickson has had a streak of 8 straight games with a sack, leads the league in that, right? And I started to think, oh man, he's gonna, be able to get his way against Tom Compton. But when I dug into the numbers, actually, someone actually pointed this out, and I looked at it on PFF. He actually lines up on the right side or the left side, for if you're facing, which means we're gonna get the battle of the two Goliaths, meaning Trey Hendrickson versus Trent Williams, because he lines up on the right side of the formation once, twice, maybe this season. So it's not even really a big deal in terms of that. So what gave me a little bit of optimism is maybe the 49ers can have their way passing the ball in this game, especially if Debo Samuel plays. And I know that coming off of this game, that sounds crazy just based on the way that Jimmy Garoppolo threw the ball. But I think that's how it's going to have to go in this one, especially considering we don't know what's going to happen with Elijah Mitchell. We don't know what's going to happen with Jeff Wilson. We don't know who's going to be available. We don't know if it's going to be Hasty. So the fact that I know that Trent Williams is going to be locked up with Trey Hendrickson, that gives me a little bit more optimism because I feel like that's where the 49ers are going to have to attack, and it's going to have to be in the passing game in this game.
Yeah, we Locked On 49ers. We did the crossover episode with the good folks from the Locked On Bengals, and they did mention that Hendrickson primarily lines up on the right side of the defense. That would be the left side of the offense. So he hasn't been somebody that they've moved around, try to get him different matchups. So it does sound like he will be going up against Trent Williams. And I would say, if you were worried about Hendrickson potentially, making life difficult for the 49ers, that erases all doubt because, Trent Williams, I mean, he might be the best player in the NFL right now. He's the highest graded player in the NFL. Matter of fact, his PFF score is so high. I didn't even know it could get that high. I've never seen anything like it. So that's how
99.1,
well
right?
Trent Williams is playing. And he's typically not an issue. One thing that the Locked On Bengals folks did, and make sure you guys, if you haven't, go listen to that episode, Locked On 49ers. But one thing that they did mention is Hendricks has been vulnerable in the run game. And obviously we know what Trent Williams' run blocking grade is, which is outstanding. So his, as a pass rusher, he's been solid. But I would say that kind of gets neutralized somewhat because of who he's going up against, unless they start to move him to the other side. But in the run game, that's where he could be had. So do you think the 49ers put more emphasis on running the ball to the left this game behind Trent Williams?
Hopefully. I mean, and it just depends on who's running the ball, right? I mean, outside of Elijah Mitchell, it hasn't really been too much. Obviously, Jeff Wilson's dealing with his injury. Can you count on Jermichael Hasty? Elijah Mitchell has been a godsend for this team considering what the 49ers thought was going to be the deepest position group that they had, right? Having Mitchell and Sermon was supposed to be a luxury on top of having Mostert. It wasn't supposed to be Mitchell, Mitchell, Mitchell. But now Mitchell's not there. And while I think that those players were, before we got to watch them this season, very capable, it's just hard to tell right now. You hope that that's the game plan, but can they execute it, right? And, and I think that your biggest tell is the second best running back behind Elijah Mitchell was Debo Samuel. And, you got to hope that one of these guys steps up. Obviously, Brian Hill just got signed. Who knows how much of an impact he can have. I really like his skill set for the Shanahan scheme, the outside zone. I think that he can be effective. He may be pressed into duty. So, I mean, that just goes to tell you the shape of this, of what they think. That means that this 49er group expects either Mitchell or Wilson to not play in this game.
Are you as encouraged as I am that this would be like that kind of get back on track game from Jimmy Garoppolo, where maybe he does go above and beyond what people think he's capable of doing? I feel like every so often, like, we'll see things kind of falling off the railings, and then he'll put the pieces back together and have a big game. Do you think that, you see anything like that in the future for Jimmy Garoppolo heading into this game against Cincinnati? And I think their defense is, this is the recipe for him. We saw a guy, Mike White, come in and throw for over 400 yards against the Cincinnati Bengals defense. We saw Justin Herbert and what he did. Now, again, I don't want to say Jimmy's Justin Herbert, but Jimmy Garoppolo has had really good games. I believe he had a 300-yard passing game against the Cincinnati Bengals a couple years ago. I do feel like this is the game where Jimmy finally is like, okay, let me get back on track and get things going, even if the 49ers can't heavily lead on the run game.
Yeah, I feel like this is the exact spot where there's a lot of doom and gloom around the team after what happened. Obviously, fan base is distraught because of what happened with Seattle. But this always feels like a game where people are like, man, 49ers about to get rolled on, or, Jimmy, and then Jimmy just is going to like lift everybody right back up, right? Like where everybody's going to be, oh, look at what he did, and this is the exact right recipe, right? Their corners are a bit vulnerable. Mike Hilton's not the guy that he used to be. They lost William Jackson. I feel like that's something that they haven't really lost. I mean, Jesse Bates is incredible though, as a
Yeah.
safety man. I think that he's like one of the most underrated players on this defense. But at the same time, especially if you can get Deebo Samuel back, this does feel like a recipe for success for Jimmy Garoppolo to at least bounce back. And for the way that everybody's kind of counting this team out, I had a lot of harsh things to say about Jimmy Garoppolo after that game. But as for the way that everybody's talking, the way that everybody's just counting this team out, and I feel like they're already just like, man, they're about to get smoked just because of the offensive weapons that Cincinnati has. Doesn't this feel like the moment where Jimmy Garoppolo is just going to play a game that, everybody's going to look around and say, well, here we are again. They're over 500 and he played well in this game. It just feels like it's just the inconsistencies, and the only thing that's consistent is that he's inconsistent. So if he had a down game, then boom, you have to assume that this is going to be the game that he gets right back on track. So yeah, I hear you on that one.
Yeah, I think so. Now he's going to need a little help, right? He's not going to be able to do it on his own. And you have George Kittle out there who had a huge game, 9 catches, over 180 yards in the last game against Seattle. Do you think George Kittle, not to that extent, but do you think he has a follow up game where he is, super involved in the offense? Because I mean, before last game, I mean, we're talking about against the who the 49ers played that last game?
Vikings, he had 2 targets.
Vikings, 2 targets, 1 catch, and the
Mhm.
1 catch was on the screen. I
Mhm.
feel like that just can't happen. Do you think that this game kind of reminded everybody and reminded Kyle Shanahan of why he should put more of an emphasis on prioritizing George Kittle in the offense?
Yeah, the most insane stat, I understand 189. That's the first time George Kittle's ever scored 2 touchdowns in a game. That's
Hmm.
incredible to me. And that's just something I honestly would have thought has happened plenty of times, but it never has. And in big moments, players make plays and get the ball in the hands of your playmakers, man. And I think that that's exactly what's going to go on, especially when I consider that I don't really think that the 49ers are going to be able to run the ball unless Elijah Mitchell goes out there. If Elijah Mitchell's ready to go and he's rolling, then they'll be able to run the ball. But I feel like, again, this is going to be a game where the 49ers are going to pass the ball to win the game. And, Brandon Ayuk didn't have a great game last week. Let's just put it out there. I mean, dropped the pass on the tunnel screen, blocked his ass off. I understand all that. Was open on some routes. We could nitpick all that. But George Kittle lifted up that offense. And I think that once you see that, it does kind of remind Kyle Shanahan, hey, that guy's pretty good. Maybe we should get that guy the ball a little bit more. And Jimmy Garoppolo loves him when he's out there. He's going to target him a ton. I think that Vikings game was a lot more run specific. Right after the interception, everything kind of just went to the run game. So I don't think that was necessarily something where they were like, oh, well, we're not going to get him involved or anything like that. I think it was just necessary with the game plan and what was going on and what Kyle felt comfortable running. Now, when you get put in a position where you see how that Seattle game's going, you're going to throw a little bit more, and the run game wasn't working as well, so you get George Kittle into space. So, yeah, I definitely think that George Kittle is going to have a big game because he's going to need to. I mean, especially if Deebo Samuel doesn't play. But even if Deebo Samuel plays, you still have to get George Kittle involved. Make the defense worry about him. Obviously, we know he brings in the run defense, but make them worry about both. So start lining them up in those heavy bunches, right? Those heavy tight end sets, and leak Kittle out of there and get him the ball, right? Like start to show the dynamics that he brings to the team. So yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point.
George Kittle at 5 touchdowns on the year right now. That's the most he's ever had, tied for the most that he's ever had in a season in his career. So we'll see. I mean, he has 5 games left to get over that hump and set a new career high. Let's go over to the defensive side of the ball, man. And you look at the 49ers defense, and I think we go straight to the cornerbacks. And they got a big time matchup this weekend. You got T. Higgins. He's coming off of a huge game. You have Jamar Chase, who started off really hot. I believe over the last 5 games, he hasn't eclipsed 50 yards receiving. So he's kind of cooled down a little bit. Do you think this is a get back on track game for Jamar Chase?
I don't actually. I worry much more about T. Higgins. And I'll tell you why, Croc. The last 3 weeks, he has had 10, 11, 12 targets. If he gets 10, 11, 12 targets in this game, regardless of the matchup on the other side, it's not going to end up well. T. Higgins is one of the guys that nobody ever really talks about from that draft class. Just because I feel like he started slowly last year, kind of put it on like later on in the year, and then people were like, "Oh yeah." Now this year, and especially this stretch of games, he's been incredible, man. I mean, Joe Burrow's just throwing that thing up to him, and he's getting it jump balls. I mean, I feel like he's one of the more slept on guys. So I don't necessarily worry as much about Chase because there's something that's a little bit off right now. And Burrow's thumb is something that we need to talk about as well too, man. That thing was gnarly and it looked horrible, man. Like he was handing the ball off with the other hand in that game.
Yeah.
If you guys remember, and when he was throwing the ball, he did throw it. He gutted it out. I don't expect Burrow to miss this game, at all. But that's something we need to talk about as well. But I definitely worry a little bit more about T. Higgins than I do Chase right now, just because of the way Higgins has been playing and the way Chase has been playing. But I want to say something about the cornerbacks, and I'm sure that this is going to get me killed in the comments, but I'm going to say it anyway, and I really don't care. I worry less about Dante Johnson than I do Josh Norman in this game. And I'm going to tell you why. Everybody dumps on Dante Johnson. Everybody always wants to make fun of him, all 9 lives, everything, but there is no film of him getting baked in coverage. You can't find it. I implore somebody to find that film. You don't like him because he's not sexy, but he's flexible. He can play the nickel. He's solid. The other thing he does, he understands his assignments. Fred Warner went to the podium yesterday and said, "I'm happy that Dante Johnson's going to be out there because he's a smart player." Josh Norman, we know what he was, but when you're not covering your assignments, you're getting beat, you're holding. You're like, did you see the DK Metcalf play? My KP
Yes.
outlined it. Yeah, all right. So the KP outlines it. He throws the ball to DK Metcalf with Josh Norman, overthrows
I
him.
saw it when it happened.
Right, Josh Norman goes
Yeah.
like this and then points in the camera like, yeah, bro, come on. So when I talk about Dante Johnson, me not worrying about him, Dante Johnson's not going to get caught out of position, right? Maybe he doesn't have the physical gifts to make a play on the ball. Maybe he's not a playmaker in that way, but he's solid enough where he's just going to be in position and he's at least going to do his job. I don't fear for him blowing assignments. That's what I mean when I say that I don't fear as much about Dante Johnson than I do Josh Norman in this game.
Yeah, Dante Johnson, he is solid. I think the one time we can really off the top of our head say like, okay, I remember him getting beat. He gave up a
Eagles
couple
touchdown.
catches against Detroit. One was a touchdown, about 4-yard touchdown. The other one, there was a catch down the sideline, but he also really battled and competed in that game. He broke up like 2 or 3 other passes. So that is cool to see somebody who is competing at the catch point. I think, I don't want to say my only pushback, but let's say he played for a full game and he gives up that touchdown that was 4 yards. He gives up that ball down the left sideline, right? I would still take what I've gotten from Josh Norman over that because Josh Norman, at the very least, punches balls out. Now, again, I know people make fun of it. I know people like, well, yeah, he gave up that catch, but he punches balls out. Like I've seen that, right? And it's like, no, like it's a real thing. He has 7 fumbles. Like that's a lot. Like that's, you know what I'm saying? Like he is impacting the game. So I hear you in the sense of you're less worried about Dante Johnson in coverage, as am I. I am less worried about Dante Johnson in coverage. I do think that Norman is more of a liability than Dante Johnson. In theory, if I just say, hey, I want to start one guy, I would go with Dante Johnson. And right now, listen, we're talking about the bottom of the roster cornerbacks. We're talking about guys who you typically don't want to have out there. But if I had to choose between the two, I would say that. But the one thing that I will continue to harp on, when you have a guy that potentially punches balls out and gives your team the opportunity to get the ball back, that's so big.
Yeah.
That's so big. Because let's say Lenore, right? Lenore gave up a touchdown, right? Gave up 2 touchdowns. Well, what if on that drive they threw the ball at Norman? He gives up the catch. He punches the ball out. You recover it. Now that limits the other guy getting beat for 2 touchdowns. You see what I'm saying? So just the impact and the domino effect of somebody that's able to force a turnover. I get it. Giving up catches, whatever. Y'all know what I've been saying. Guys are going to give up catches regardless. Guys are going to give up touchdowns regardless. Matter of fact, 49ers actually give up the least amount of passing touchdowns in the league. They're top 5 or top 3 in the least amount of passing touchdowns. 49ers are actually in the top of the league in a lot of categories. They're number 5 in passing yards against them. Yards per attempt against them is extremely low. They're like top 5 in that. Like their coverage stats aren't bad. They're actually pretty solid. Like they're top 5. It could be a lot worse. So when I look at Norman, I'm willing to give and take a weird, like, Norman, you didn't really do anything, but you did the whole like, don't throw at me, whatever. Let him have his moment. You know what I'm saying? But if at some point he's going to potentially affect the game by punching a ball out, then it's whatever.